Greetings and salutations. So good to see you all for another episode of Sound Mind. I am Jay Gideon Winfrey, licensed therapist, and again, such a pleasure to be with you. Such a blessing, such a blessing. I want to thank you all so much for supporting Sound Mind in season 6. Not just Sound Mind, but also all of the great quality programming that we have here on Hope TV. So please support all of the different platforms that we have. You're guaranteed to be blessed exceedingly so. So let's go ahead and get into it because this is the first episode of season 6. I have been just waiting to get back to you all. So much content that God has blessed me with to share with you all. For those of you all who may not know me, just a little bit about myself. I am a 26-year practitioner. I've been in behavioral health and mental health for 26 years. I've been fully licensed for 17 years in the state of Georgia. I've worked in a myriad of capacities, but I love serving God's people. My philosophy as a faith-based practitioner is very simple. I use the sacred in order to influence the secular. So what I believe is putting together clinical theories that are supported and guided by biblical principles. And so that is what I use in my practice, and that is what works with my population, because I truly believe that all of the answers that we need are literally in God's word, but we have to interpret those appropriately as it relates to how do we move people from one stage to another. And that's where I come in as a behavioral health practitioner, okay? So that's a little bit about me for those who may not know, but let's go ahead and dive into this particular episode for the first episode for season 6, okay? Now, when I contemplated what it was that I wanted to introduce this particular episode with, it was a very heavy prompting to look at the concept of forgiveness, okay? Now, when we think of forgiveness impacts us in a lot of ways: self-forgiveness, external forgiveness, and things of that sort. So what ends up happening a lot of times is people talk about forgiveness, but they can't really explain what it is. People can say that I've forgiven my parents, I've forgiven my ex, I've forgiven a sibling, but when you ask them to explain it, it seems to be very difficult for them to explain. And normally if something is difficult for a person to explain, it means that maybe they haven't gone through the entire process. So this comes up a lot in my patient population, in my practice, when people come and they're angry, they're hurt, they have problems trusting. Oftentimes it comes because true forgiveness has not been given. So what I want to do is have this episode focus on the psychology of forgiveness, okay? The psychology of forgiveness. Now, what I want to do is I want to break forgiveness down in terms of how I present this to my patient population. And the way we're going to do this is going to require us to get in the Wayback Machine and kind of go back to our early elementary school English understanding, okay? Because I'm going to show you the concept of forgiveness in 3 different areas. We're going to talk about the etymology, which is the origin. Then we're going to talk about its application. And then we're going to talk about direction, okay? So again, the 3 phases of forgiveness: etymology, which is the origin; application, which is how we actually apply it; but then lastly will be direction. Where do we go once it's applied, okay? So let's go ahead and dive in with the etymology. Now, here's what I want you to do. If you have a pen and paper, I want you to take the word forgiveness and I want you to write it out. Forgiveness, okay? So once you've written out the word forgiveness, I want you to literally break it down into 3 sections. We want to take the F-O-R as section 1, all right? Then we want to take G-I-V-E, or give, for section 2. And then we want to take N-E-S-S, ness, for section 3, okay? Because these are the 3 different components and phases we're going to be addressing in the psychology of forgiveness, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the etymology of each word, and then I'm going to give you the definition. And then when we get done, we're going to be able to put it all together for our definition of forgiveness, okay? And this is one that really is going to help us be able to move forward and through the stages of forgiveness, okay? So let's look at component 1, phase 1, which is for, F-O-R. Now, for has an etymology of being from German and Danish descent, okay? Now, when you look at the word for in the word forgiveness, for is, from an English perspective, is referred to as a prefix. Now, we all remember from elementary school English that the prefix comes before the main word, okay? So what I tell my patient population is Before you can make any progression in anything where you've been hurt or offended, you have to make the decision to forgive. So when we look at the FOR, when we look at the for, and with it being a prefix, we have to make the decision that we're going to forgive. If you have not made the decision that you're going to forgive, then anything else after that is going to be completely counterproductive. It's not going to have any type of rooting to it because you haven't made a conscious, spiritual, mental, and emotional decision to forgive. So we got to decide from the very beginning that this is what we do. You don't stumble into forgiveness. It is an active decision, okay? So that's when we look at when you talk about the prefix for. Before we do anything else, we have to make a decision. Now, when you look at the definition of for, and I looked at about 25 different definitions, and the one that I saw that seemed to be the most clinically progressive was in support of, okay? So when you look at the word for, attach it with the definition of in support of, okay? Or a willingness in support of. So that's going to be our definition for the word for. Willingness or in support of, okay? So that's for, all right? So make sure you have component one, for. And remember, it's a prefix, which means that before we go to the main thing, before we go to the action, we got to make the decision, okay? Now, since we got for out the way, let's go ahead and proceed to the next component, which is the give, G-I-V-E, okay? Now, give is our second phase and our second component. Now, give, going back to our English elementary school lessons, give obviously means it is a verb. It is an action, okay? And give has its origins in three different language basics of Dutch, German, and Old English. So the word give has been around a long time and has gone through different generations and different evolutions, okay? So when you look at give is a verb. It is an action. So when we look at give, again, researched about 20 to 25 different definitions. And the one that fits what we're talking about in terms of forgiveness is setting aside or sacrificing for a purpose, okay? That's our definition for give. Setting aside or sacrificing for a purpose. Now, it can go either way. It can be setting aside and sacrificing, or setting aside or sacrificing. But there's a setting aside and there's a sacrificing that takes place, okay? For a purpose. That's the key point that I really want you to home in on. I want you to put an asterisk by for a purpose. Because we're not just doing it to be doing it. In order for forgiveness to be impactful, it has to have a purpose, has to have an object, has to have a conclusion. So I want to make sure that we're focused on that when it comes to give. Now, mind you, again, give is a verb, thus an action. It's action. It's not just talking. It's literally a matter of movement. There's action involved, okay? All right, so now that we got give out the way, let's go to the third phase and the third component, ness, N-E-S-S, okay? Now, when we look at ness, ness has its origins from an etymology regard, Dutch, German, Old English. So it means that the word's been around a long time, okay? So when you talk about ness, ness is a suffix, okay? So going back and looking at our English lessons back from elementary school, we know that the suffix comes at the end of a word, okay? And I think that that is strategically placed because when you talk about forgiveness, by the time that we've made a decision to forgive and we've put forth the action, the verb to actually do it, now you're at the end when you talk about how important it is that when it's all over said and done, that we come to the end that we've made up our minds to actually follow through with it. So that's why ness is the suffix, is what we end with, okay? Now, as I said, ness is a suffix, and ness also has Dutch, German, Old English origins. But when we say ness, basically, after doing the research of about 20, 25 different definitions, the definition that we want to go with for ness is the state or condition that we're in, okay? So again, ness is the state or condition that we're in, okay? So when you put all that together, you have your for, you have your give, and then you have your ness. 3 different components, all right? So when we put our definition for forgiveness, and I want you to write this down, our definition for forgiveness is this: in support of setting aside or sacrificing for a purpose because of the condition that we're in.
What's up, House of Hope? It's the Flavor King, and welcome back to Cooking with Flavor KL. You know what time it is. It's time for me to show you how to make chili.
My Shiro doesn't always wear a cape, but she always has time for a hug, a smile, for going the extra mile. My Shiro stretches every dollar, puts in long hours, puts others first. But now it's your time, Mom. When you're ready to retire, we want you to be able to enjoy it. It's time to start saving now. A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today. Visit aceyourretirement.org/Shiro.
You know, we're going to talk about something that you hear more and more about today, and that's dementia.
Alzheimer's disease and dementia drastically impacts the Black community. We're twice more likely to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or a form of dementia in comparison to our white counterparts. And so again, this is why it's so important for us to take a minute and to learn about this, to see what's going on, and then understand how we can reduce our risk.
I'm going to say that again. In support of setting aside or sacrificing for a purpose because of the condition that we're in. That's our forgiveness definition. But what I often tell my population in private practice that I work with is once we come up with the definition, it's even more powerful when you go backwards. And anyone that knows anything about studying of the Hebrew language, Hebrew reads backwards, okay? So we're going to read this backwards, and you're going to see the power in the psychology of forgiveness and how important it is and how we can apply this to our own mental health and our relational dynamics when it comes to others. So when you read it backwards, it's basically saying, because of the state or condition that we're in, I am choosing to set aside or sacrifice for a purpose, and I am in full support and willing to do so. All right? So again, when we read it backwards, because of the state or condition that I or we are in, I am in support of sacrificing or setting aside for a purpose. I really, if you ask me to pick which definition I like, it's the same definition, it's just a matter of whether we read it forward or backwards. I like the backwards definition because it really ushers in why forgiveness is often needed. Forgiveness is often needed and extended because of the state or condition that I or we are in. So when you talk about forgiveness, basically what you're saying is, I don't like the way I feel. I don't like the way we are. And because I don't like the way I feel and I don't like the way that we are, then I am in support, meaning that I have a willingness. I am in support of setting aside or sacrificing for a purpose. Now, the key thing in this definition is the end is for a purpose. If our forgiveness has no purpose, then it's not really forgiveness. It can be making amends. And making amends is not the same thing as giving forgiveness or receiving forgiveness for that matter. So that's our definition that we have for forgiveness. But I want to go to the next part, which is actual application. How do we take, once we have the etymology and once we have the definition of forgiveness, what do? Okay, now we got forgiveness. How do we apply it? I'm glad you asked, okay? So here's 4 different components of the actual application of forgiveness. And this is important because we want forgiveness to be visible. We want it to be measurable. It needs to be seen. Remember, the give part is a verb in action, so it requires us to do something, all right? So when we talk about forgiveness, now let's go back to for. Remember the first part, F-O-R. And remember our for part means in support of, okay? So when we talk about the application of being in support of forgiveness, here's what it looks like. If you're in support of forgiveness, you have a willingness to talk as well as a willingness to listen. Let me say that again. If you're in support of forgiveness, there is a willingness to talk and a willingness to listen. That also looks, in a couple of ways. It can also look in the way of how do we take ownership of our actions? How do we actually apologize? How do we accept apologies? How do we give attention to the matter? So all of these things are active demonstrations of what it looks like to be in support of forgiveness, okay? It's hard to be in support of forgiveness if you're not willing to talk, if you're not willing to take ownership, if you're not willing to listen, if you're not willing to apologize. Now notice I didn't say I'm sorry, but say I apologize, okay? And that's something that I stress to those that I work with, particularly my couples. It says a lot about your emotional and relational maturity when you can apologize to your mate. Oftentimes, if a person can't apologize, that's a very difficult dynamic to work with in any relationship. So I always encourage, be quick to apologize. Be quick to self-assess what you may have done to contribute to the dynamic so you can go back to the relationship being in its highest status possible, okay? So all those are things that we do in the applying of the for, F-O-R part of forgiveness, meaning in support of. This is how we show we are in support of forgiveness, okay? So now that we have the for part, let's go to the second part of application, which is give. So what does the give part look like in its application and forgiveness? So the give part looks like this. When you're talking about setting aside and sacrificing, what we're saying is we are willing to set aside time, ill feelings, anger, hurt, bitterness, pride, accessibility, revenge in ourselves. So I gave you a lot of things to consider because those are the things that we're willing to put aside. Remember our definition of give is setting aside or sacrificing. I'm going to sacrifice my anger for the purpose of us being able to be in full reconciliation, for us being able to move forward as a family, as husband and wife, as girlfriend, boyfriend, as brother and sister. I'm willing to do that, and this is evidenced through my giving. Remember, setting aside or sacrificing, okay? It's very important that these are your action words. What am I willing to give? You know, am I willing to give my accessibility? And that's important. If somebody is wanting to truly be in partnership with you regarding forgiveness, they're going to make themselves accessible, okay? They're going to make themselves available. Now, the beautiful thing about forgiveness is that forgiveness does not necessarily require somebody on the receiving end. You can forgive a person without their permission. It's one of those things where you don't necessarily need somebody else to do it. But nonetheless, it's important to understand that there is an action and a series of actions that's involved when it comes to forgiveness in that aspect, okay? All right, so let's go to the third component, which is ness. Remember we talked about ness, N-E-S-S, being the suffix at the end, which means the state or condition that we're in, okay? Now, when you talk about the state or condition that we're in, this is where we look and say, okay, what kind of state or condition are we in, am I in? Normally when forgiveness is needing to be applied, normally the state or condition that we're in, it could be one of strain, it can be one of distance, it could be one of confusion, uneasiness, tension, anxiousness, anxiety, brokenness, hurt, or even anger, okay? Those are the things that propel us to want to move to forgiveness because of the state or condition that we're in. So what the goal is for us to get to a state or condition of cohesiveness, a state or condition of release, a state or condition of peace, a state or existence of coexistence, or even a state or existence of being able to agree without being disagreeable, okay? So that is when we look at the application of the state or condition that we are in. Now, the fourth component to the application phase of forgiveness is one based on the purpose, okay? What is the purpose of forgiveness? Now, only you can decide that. And this is the beautiful thing, again, about forgiveness, is that it doesn't necessarily require another person's action, reaction, or interaction. You can give forgiveness if you know that the purpose is, I just want to be free from the subject matter. I want to be able to sleep well at night. I want to be able to make sure that all is well between God and myself. I want to make sure that I'm good emotionally. However, this is the purpose. And so when you decide what the purpose is, that guides you in the principles of how you want to apply forgiveness, okay? So the purpose can be endless. Basically, your purpose is your why reason. It's not your what, it's your why. Now, a lot of times about forgiveness, it doesn't require us to have a conversation with people. Now, ideally, I would promote that because it's always better to have dialogue with someone. But if the person is resistant, if the person may not be here, then there's still forgiveness that can be given because it frees you from the very tethering that you have to the offense that was done to you, okay? So it has to have your purpose, okay? So remember, in the application is being in support of, it's also being able to set aside, sacrifice, then also because of the state of the condition that we're in, and then also for a purpose, okay? So that's how we apply it. I want to give you tools how to apply it because the sound mind, we don't want to just talk about the conversation, we want the conviction, and then we want the conversion, okay? So I want to give you actual tools, the same tools I would give you if you came to see me one-on-one for individual therapy, or if you came to see me for family, or if you came to see me for marriage therapy and counseling. The same tools I want to give you because you're part of the Hope TV family, and I love you, and I thank God for you that you're here. So I want everybody to truly have a sound mind and have a sound heart, okay? So that's why we're giving you the tools.
How do you decide what is a priority at the moment versus something that you can complete at a later date?
What feels right in the moment? Because sometimes it's like, okay, this is really high on my priority list, but I really just don't feel like it. But I think that in order to be productive is like, do what's best for what you feel like in the moment. So if this easier task is easier for you, do that and then tackle the harder task.
Part-time job, full-time hustle, all-time Shiro to all of us. You nurture, we listen. You teach, we thrive. You lift our spirits, but we've got to lay down the truth. It's time for you, our Shiro, to stretch for the stars. A free online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today. Start saving more for retirement so you can feel prepared and live your life to the fullest. Visit aceyourretirement.org.
So what is some major hesitancies around this vaccine?
Because I ask younger people all the time, why haven't you gotten the shot? A lot of people say, well, my mom hasn't gotten it. And so I think people are impacted by the parents and whatever reasons they have for not getting it. I don't know if you heard Nicki Minaj put out information about her cousin having her testicles swollen, and of course that took off, went viral.
Can we clarify that the vaccine did not cause his testicles to be enlarged?
None of that. I mean, we do have some risk associated with the vaccine, but the things that we hear out in the public aren't what they are.
We went through the 2 phases of forgiveness. Remember, we talked about the etymology, which is the origin. We got our definition, and we just talked about the application, okay? The 4 different components of application. Now, the last phase that we want to talk about is the direction of forgiveness. Once we have its origins, once we have applied it, where do we go after that? Because when we forgive people or when we go through the process of forgiveness, it can feel a little awkward sometimes. It's like, I don't know how to get my footing back. This is different, feels a little out of place. And that's okay because you're in the process of deciding where to go now that forgiveness has been ushered. Now, I'm going to tell you what I tell my population when we're one-on-one, because this is the thing about forgiveness that I think sometimes gets misunderstood. And quote me when I say this. Forgiveness does not mean automatic restoration, reinstatement, or reconciliation. That's not what it means. So a lot of times, particularly with my couples, when issues come up and then one to say to the other, well, you didn't truly forgive me because you bring it back up. We got to work on that part, because forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean I've forgotten. It just means that I'm also in a place of trying to move past it. But every now and then I might have something that I bring up, but just check me on it. Check me on it, because if I'm truly dedicated to the process of forgiveness, then I will be able to regulate myself to make sure that if we do have a disagreement, I can at least fight fairly and just focus on what the main subject is at the time, okay? So a lot of times with my couples as well, if there's an issue, and for all truth and purposes, oftentimes it's the husband that does this, but oftentimes what happens is if there's an argument, and then there's, forgiveness given. Sometimes my brothers, we think that, okay, since forgiveness has been given, then that means that everything should be okay and everything should go back to normal. And if you look at my facial expression, I'm a husband, so I understand the language and the assignment. So because I've been forgiven, then everything should be afforded to me. I love how Pastor Smith says, and the Bible says this as well, do benevolence. Do benevolence should be ushered. And if you don't know what do benevolence is, then Google it, because I won't necessarily define it for you in this particular venue. But oftentimes husbands will tend to think that because forgiveness has been given, then that means that the restoration of all rights and benefits of holy matrimony and covenant is fully restored, and that's not necessarily the truth of the matter. So basically what I'm saying is, particularly to my married folk, my married brother and sister, that forgiveness does not mean automatic restoration. It means we on the way there, but we just got to give it some time and some understanding. So forgiveness does not mean actual restoration, okay? So when you talk about direction, I thought it was really important, because this is what I say to my population. Forgiveness puts us in the position to move forward, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we actually do it. It means that we level the field, that we let bygones be bygones, we reach a state of understanding, we reach a state of clarity. Moving forward together is not necessarily a part of forgiveness. It just puts us in the position to be able to move forward together. And I hope y'all understand what I'm saying, okay? It puts us in the position, if we choose, based on the clarity gained, based on understanding how to be able to move forward together. It gives us that option. So with that being said, in summation, forgiveness, again, does not mean automatic restoration, reformation, reconciliation, or reinstatement. Now, let's go back to our English lesson from elementary school. We all know whenever we see the word RE, RE again is another prefix. So when we see the word RE, it means again, okay? So when you talk about remix, we're mixing again. If you're talking about a restart, we're talking about starting again. So whenever you see these words, restoration, reformation, reconciliation, and reinstatement, when you see the word RE, here's what I want you to do, because this is what I do again with my patient population. Take that RE, which means again, take the again and put it behind the root word that comes after the RE suffix. So for example, when you say that we've entered into a state of forgiveness and we're agreeing, if you look at the word restore, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, do I want to store again with you? Okay, because restore, take the R-E, which means again, move it behind the base word, which is store, and then ask yourself the question, do I want to store again with this person? You can do that with the word reform. Reform, take the prefix R-E, move it behind form, and change it into again. Do I want to form again with you? Okay? Reconcile. Take the R-E, its meaning again, put it behind the consile. Do I want to consile or counsel with you again? Reinstate. Again, take R-E, it means again, move it to the back end of the word instate, and then ask yourself the question, do I want to instate again? Do I want to be in state with you again? All right? So asking ourselves these questions can help us take the forgiveness that we've already provided in its origins, how we provide it in application, and now it puts us in a position to ask the question, do I want to go in this direction with you? Now, sometimes you may reach a conclusion that some people you just can't move forward with, and that's okay. I want to be very clear with that. I can say that from a personal perspective. There have been people in my life that I have forgiven and I'm at peace with, but I also understand that from where I'm going in my journey, the way that my life looks as a godly husband, as a godly father of four, certain people just can't go along for the journey because it would threaten what it is that I'm aspiring to be and what it is my goal is in life to answer my calling. So I can't reinstate because I can't be in state with you again. Okay? I can't reform because I can't form with you again. Okay? Because the trust may not be there. So it lets me know what direction to go in, and that way everybody's clear. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't necessarily have the ability to have a relationship. It just means that that relationship dynamic that we once knew is going to have to be different. Okay? Going to have to be different, okay? And this is very important for you to understand as far as is directive regard, because I don't want you all getting confused about what forgiveness really looks like. So that's why I wanted to give it to you this way as far as the breakdown, the ability to put it together, and the understanding that you have a choice in it as far as how it manifests itself, but also a choice in how you apply it, as well as the choice in how you want to go with it in a direction regard, okay? So understand that from a direction regard, any future connection is made possible by forgiveness, but it doesn't obligate us, okay? Sometimes people like to say, well, if you've forgiven me, then, then we should be able to do this or do that, or it should go back to the way it was. No, it can't go back to the way it was in light of the information that we have, in light of what we went to. Now, here's the thing. It can't go back to the way it was, but forgiveness does give the opportunity for us to be better than what it was. And that's what I love about forgiveness, and that's why I promote it. It gives us the opportunity to learn from what it is that hurt both of us. It gives us the opportunity to move forward in light of. Oftentimes where we go wrong in life is we want to do things in lieu of, meaning we want to overlook it. We want to disregard it. But when we do things in light of, we're saying, because of the information that we have, because of the experience that we've gone through, I want to be able to make a decision that is inclusive of where we are in this journey so that we don't repeat past infractions and we can be better than what we were before if we both agree on it. That's the beautiful thing about forgiveness, okay? So that's what I wanted to give you in episode 1 of season 6, the psychology of forgiveness, because forgiveness is so paramount. And then from a spiritual regard, because you know how I get down, you know how I'm going to integrate that sacred with the secular. This is the very thing that God did for us. This is the very thing that Christ did for us. When you look at the definition of forgiveness, is what he did. Because of the state and condition that we were in, sin-filled, filthy, we didn't have a relationship with God. We were broken. We were set apart from him. Because of the state and condition that we were in, he was in support of setting aside his majesty, setting aside his power, his greatness, and sacrificing his body for the purpose of us being in relationship. That's forgiveness. We saw it with Christ. It's what he did for us. So take that definition, take that example, and we live it on earth using that as the blueprint and going through these processes. And I guarantee you that you'll be able to move forward in forgiveness in a way that's sound and a way that's solid. So that's it for episode 1. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for being a part of season 6. Looking forward to all we're going to do. Be blessed in everything you do, and thank you for the support of not just Sound Mind, but all of the programming at Hope TV. And as I always say, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May he turn his loving smile and countenance towards you, blessing you in your going outs and your coming ins. And may he give thee shalom peace. I am J. Gideon Winfrey, licensed therapist, and as I always say at the end, remember that sound doctrine comes from a sound mind. So allow your theology to influence your psychology, okay? So we'll see you for the next episode next week. Be blessed. Take care. Love y'all.
Y'all didn't know the answer to this, but John P. Key is your name, but what does the P stand for?
The P actually stands for Prince. Dr. Scott and Brian Scott, years ago when I signed my first deal, they ran with it and started the Prince of Gospel, but that's where it came from. Lizzie and John named me John Prince Key.